Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining our Gradient 101 webinar series. We have the bit.ly link for you in the bottom left corner of your screen, and we're going to jump right into some bite-sized training around the topic of customizing performance bands. So let me jump right into our section. So our format for our webinar is I will walk you through some step-by-step tips for customizing performance bands, pass along some pro tips that we've learned along the way working with teachers and leaders using Gradient, and then suggest some extra credit that you might try out if you want to see what else you can creatively do with performance bands. So just as some background, we have some support articles linked for you about what performance bands are. You can think of them as your grading scale or your cut points that you use alongside your assignments. And there are different options depending on what type of subscription you have with Gradient. So if you're a teacher using Gradient on a teacher premium plan, you have a performance band set that you can modify for yourself. And if you're a leader using Gradient and have admin access, you have the ability to create performance band sets for your entire district or and a single school or multiple schools that you work with. So you have a couple of different options there. And the links that you see on our slides will jump you into a little bit more information about performance bands and what you have access to. Jumping right into GradeCam to show this live, when you're logged into Gradient and you visit your account menu, you can go to your settings, and that's where you're going to find performance bands. So if I click here on performance bands, I'll be able to see my own personal performance bands. And then I'm also able, because of the access I have, to see district performance bands as well. So that's why you're seeing so many. But my performance bands have a little edit next to them. They're in this section that says personal. And I'm able to change the name of my grading scale, the abbreviation that's going to show up in reports and in grade transfer, and then the cut point range, as well as the colors that are designated for performance bands. And where this shows up in Gradient are on our reports and within our grade transfer options. So you do have the option of picking performance bands there, and I'll show that in just a moment. But this is where you can set them up or modify them. If you are a school or district leader and have access to admin mode, you're able to also set up performance band sets for your teachers. So just showing this real quick, I know not all teachers have this access, but you might know somebody that does. So you can encourage them to help you out here if you need it. So performance bands for the whole subscription are listed here, and you can see we have quite a few options. And the reason why this might work well for you is you might have a grading scale that everybody uses across your department, across your school, and across your district. But it might not be the same at your elementary, your middle, and your high school. So you might have different performance bands set up. You also might have performance-based assessments that you're using school or district-wide common rubrics for. And that would be another good use case for creating performance bands to grade things differently and give different types of feedback to your students and to your teams. So let me jump back into teacher mode real quick and jump back to our slides. So here you can see two pictures of performance bands just to give you some examples. So again, the use case for this is these cut points just change the conversation that you're having around student achievement and performance. So if you're working towards standards-based or competency-based grading, if you're trying to grade something on a grading scale for a report card, these would all be different use cases for performance bands. Some pro tips that we wanted to pass along are just to help you think about where else these performance bands show up in Gradient and how else you might be able to use them. So there's two support article links over here on the left that talk a little bit about grade transfer as they relate to performance bands and the way that you can view reports with performance bands. So if I click on this view reports option, just to give you an idea, our performance bands are a configuration option that we can see across reports. So you'll see this little configure button on many of our reports and see the option to view student data with % tied to performance bands or the performance band abbreviation itself. So that's two quick places that you might find performance bands and be able to switch that data analysis view that you have. Jumping into the system here just to see it live. If I'm inside of an assignment that has student response data, so let me run real quick and jump over to that report section. Here I'm able to view performance bands and select what data lens I want to use when I'm looking at student achievement data. And I'm also able, if I'm looking at a particular report, maybe performance by question or by standard, I'm able to configure here to see my data with those performance bands or just the straight percentage calculation from the score. So a couple different options there. In the grade transfer section, just to hop over here to our response page, I'm able to do grade transfers and allow performance band based grade transfers. So if I'm going to be transferring performance based on how students did on a particular standard, I might want to do that at the level of performance band instead of just taking the raw points. And I also, if I'm doing standards or competency-based grading, instead of transferring over the percent that students achieved on an assignment, like 100% or 50% or 83%, I might want to use the rubric scale or standards-based grading scale of proficient or 4, 3, 2, 1, and do that instead. So here you can see I have a performance band abbreviation used, and I can transfer standard level performance for my students, which makes it a lot nicer and aligns to my gradebook. And again, where the performance bands are set up for us are in that reports section. So if I want to use the rubric-based performance band on a 4, 3, 2, 1 scale, and then I want to see that reflected in my grade transfer, I just make that update. You can see that 4, 3, 2, 1 scale here that I can now use to transfer performance on a standard instead of just the overall score of an assignment. So some great tips here. I know we're all using Gradient a little bit differently, so we give you quite a few options. Moving on to some of our pro tips beyond standards-based and competency-based grading, that rubric grading is going to be really helpful as well. So if you have a rubric that has multiple categories, or you're looking at multiple dimensions, you might not just want to use your standard grading scale. You might want to think about where students are going to fall within that rubric and how you want to display the feedback for students and for yourself when you're looking at the data. So some extra credit for you. I find that performance bands are really helpful for the non-standard types of assignments and assessments that some folks are using Gradient for. So again, like I've mentioned multiple times, rubric specific feedback, really helpful to create performance bands specific to a rubric. I know for our example here, writing rubrics, I often see writing rubrics with many, many different dimensions. Let me pull one up here to see if I can show one real quick. A writing rubric that might look like this with several performance categories across the top and many, many dimensions that we're looking at might not lend itself to a typical grading scale. So again, a really good use case for using a rubric-based performance band. And also if you're doing any type of surveys, so you can create creative question types within Gradient to ask students to rate their understanding of material or to talk about their learning style preferences. And if you wanted to use a Likert scale or some other scale for students to respond, beyond just a multiple choice question, creating performance bands specifically for those surveys and the types of responses you're collecting will really help you. So in the picture down below, you can see I've done a survey to ask my students about their learning preferences, and I'm able to see whether they chose 3, which means they like social activities for their learning, 2, where they like flexible activities, or 1, where they like independent activities. So it's just another way to collect information from students beyond, just the assessment and assignment types that we have. And one more great resource, we have a blog post here about how performance bands will save your life. So we've talked a little bit to teachers in the field to find out from them how they're using performance bands. So there's just a little bit more information here about what performance bands are and some different use cases for how you might be using them. So definitely check out our blog post, see if you get any great ideas here. And feel free to let us know if you come up with some more creative use cases of your own. And then if you haven't come to one of our Gradient 101 sessions before and you're feeling like, wow, I'm really behind, I have a lot more to catch up on, there's all these other topics available for you with the recordings already posted. Sometimes you're asked to register for those recordings, no problem, they're absolutely free. We're just capturing who's looking at which ones so we know what to develop next. So don't be afraid of that question about registering. You can still get to the recording. They're completely free and accessible to you at any time. I think that's it for today's topic. If you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out to support@gradecam.com. I'm going to stop the recording, and if any of you have questions, feel free to post those in our chat. Thanks for joining us today.